we'll get started. Just do some introduction at the beginning in case we have some people come in a little bit later. But today is in honor of or to celebrate Heart Health Month. So a presentation about nutrition as it's related to heart health. Which gets so much negative representation, right? Like, oh man, I can't eat anything fun. It's kind of reminds me of when we start to talk about diabetes or some other chronic conditions. People kind of get discouraged and disappointed that maybe they're going to be really limited. And I hope that today you see that that's not true. And just really looking into that misinformation can be really helpful. So I am Stacia. I'm a registered dietitian. I've been on campus several times for presentations. I also do staff and faculty one-on-one counseling, so you should be getting an email soon for that. I have a few dates this month where I have some openings. I also work in tandem with Leela, who is the student dietitian. So for you students, great resource in the health center, wellness center. You have your own dietitian. So I'm a registered dietitian, which means my background is in evidence-based nutrition. And I'm also an intuitive eating counselor. So I work a lot with an anti-diet approach to all situations. I do a lot of eating disorder prevention and eating disorder treatment. That's kind of my niche. And then delve into some topics like this too. I was thinking on the way here, it has been so long since I've been able to give a presentation on something like this, heart health. My focus is so different. So it was really fun to kind of look back at some information that I hadn't read over in a while and look at some new research, which I have for you today. I also have a slide at the end with references, and I think that I should send that to Steph after, and then she can pass it out because I have some really important direct quotes from some studies, and then you could, if you're interested, delve into that more. Okay, so nutrition for heart health, but my focus is how to love your heart without hating your diet, without being discouraged and limited and frustrated with what you can or shouldn't eat, right? A lot of times we get focused on all the things we can't do or shouldn't do, and that can really take a negative approach to what you can eat. So today our learning objectives overall, take the fear and worry out of your diet in relation to heart health and cardiovascular health and disease. Add some new tools to your nutrition toolkit and how you can approach your longevity and your overall wellness and health, not just related to your heart. And then remove weight stigma from heart health, which we'll talk about briefly at the end, but there's some really powerful up-and-coming research being done about weight and how our healthcare system, I mean, this is such a loaded topic, our healthcare system is so weight phobic, fat phobic, and that we really emphasize weight equals negative health outcomes. And so we'll get to that, but that's an important piece of today. So this is kind of where I structured the presentation around, and this is from the International Journal of Molecular Science. The citation is at the end, but on nutrition and heart health. And it says, so the focus should be on a high intake of fiber, antioxidants, vitamins, minerals, polyphenols. Anybody know what polyphenols are? When I was in school, we called them phytochemicals, and so they're plant-based things, right? They don't fit into the category. They don't give us energy, so they're not a macronutrient. They're not a vitamin and mineral. They're a beneficial thing found in plant-based foods, like antioxidants. That's a great example. And then those tricky monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fatty acids, which are nicknamed MUFA and PUFAs respectively. Low intake of salt, refined sugar, saturated and trans fat, and carbohydrates of low glycemic load or index, which we'll talk about. And so that's kind of where the presentation is broken up to. We'll focus on fiber, fat, carbs, salt, exercise, and then dieting and weight. If at any time you have a question, we'll have questions at the end, but if you have something very casual, and when I ask questions, they're not rhetorical. I like everybody to be involved. So, right off the bat, how much fiber should you be eating during the day? Yeah.
25 grams.
Yeah, that's a great estimate. Right in that range. How much do you think the average American, how many grams of fiber do you think the average American does eat per day? Lower, yeah, 15. They average 15, so much lower. So let me see. We'll talk about that in a couple of slides. But yeah, that average is around 25, give or take, given your sex. A lot of research shows that men could be as high as 38, eating 38 grams. And yeah, we're on average getting 15. So a lot of things can derive from that. So what is fiber? It's an undigestible portion of the plant. It is considered a carbohydrate, but we don't digest it, so we don't absorb energy from it, calories from it. So it's broken into two categories, insoluble and soluble, and that's really not what you need to worry about. You don't have to count your insoluble grams and your soluble grams. They just work differently in your body. So insoluble means it's not broken down by water, right? So really hard textured plant products, I think corn, celery stalks, really rough vegetables, seeds, nuts, some seeds and nuts. They help provide bulk to your stool and push it along faster. So they help keep you regular, right? Soluble fiber can absorb water. It can be soluble. So that pulls in water and adds bulk and fluidity to your stool. Lots of TMI about your stool today, but it's important. And I can't go a presentation without talking about it. So really, really high benefits to having enough fiber. Foods high in fiber, this is not an exclusive list. So please don't go about your next, years saying this is the only foods I can eat to get fiber. These are foods that are extraordinary in fiber. Beans, broccoli, berries, avocados, whole grains, potatoes, nuts and seeds. Potatoes get a bad rap out there in the nutrition world, but they have a lot of benefits. So those are really high. Any plant food, any fruit and vegetable has great fiber for you. Any whole grain, great amount of fiber, right? And if you have a food, if you were to eat a salad with all of these things, you would probably be uncomfortable, right? Like, we don't want a meal with all high fiber foods. The point is to get it throughout the day. Because a really high amount of fiber can cause some GI distress. Has anybody had more than one fiber, one bar in a day? It doesn't feel good. A really high concentration of fiber. Okay, so some people say, but I don't have a problem going to the bathroom. I'm probably fine on fiber. Well, it has so many other benefits. It's been linked to weight management. One of the reasons is that it's not easily broken down, right? Like a piece of Wonder Bread or orange slice, or orange juice, right? That doesn't really keep you full. So fiber stays in your stomach longer, keeps you fuller, keeps that hunger, keeps you satisfied longer, and has been linked because of that to weight management. Heart health. So fiber actually binds with LDL cholesterol, which is low density lipoprotein cholesterol, and that's the bad cholesterol. So you can think L lousy. So LDL is the lousy type of cholesterol, because there's a good type of cholesterol too that we'll talk about. So fiber starts to bind with LDL in the GI tract and pulls it out of your system. So high fiber, positive for heart health, lowers that LDL cholesterol. Which has connections with controlled blood pressure and less inflammation. Blood pressure regulation goes back to that first point, and that it keeps you full longer and doesn't break down. So if you were to have a meal, carbohydrate-rich meal that didn't have a lot of fiber, the carbohydrates would be broken down quickly, and the glucose would be absorbed into your bloodstream quickly. If you add a lot of fiber into that, the glucose is going to be broken down and absorbed slower. So that's one of the points when, if you're ever getting educated or talked to about diabetes, when they say, like don't eat simple carbs, eat complex carbs. Complex carbs is just for a name for something that has that fiber in it. Simple carbs break down easier and raise your glucose faster. Not always a bad thing. Simple carbs can be part of a very healthy diet, but those complex carbs slowly release glucose. So instead of, not trying to flip to my diabetes hat, but instead of your blood sugars going spike down, they have this nice roll in them throughout the day, and that's the goal. Cancer prevention. Fiber has a huge correlation with reduced GI-related cancers, colon cancer specifically. And it provides fiber-rich foods often have a higher amount of antioxidants, vitamins, and minerals. So back to the recommendations, most institutes would recommend 20 to 30 grams. Some recommend as high as 30 to 38 for men. When increasing fiber, so say you're sitting here thinking, man, I really don't actually get that much fiber. I'm going to start eating a ton of fiber tomorrow. Make sure you're increasing your water intake. So if you think of critical thinking hat on, if you have a huge increase in fiber without water, it can actually lead to constipation, right? So even though you're eating that fiber, you need the water to coincide with that. Fats. So this is really the coined topic of heart health, right? So we'll dive in, but there's a lot of fat fear in food, fat in food fear, and hopefully we can chat about where to go from here. So fat can be kind of sorted into 3 categories that we'll talk about: saturated fats, trans fats, and unsaturated fats, which, if you're being more specific, unsaturated fats would actually be monounsaturated fats and polyunsaturated fats. And if you're really curious, that those terms come from the bonds, the chemical makeup of the fatty acids binding to make the lipid in the fat molecule. The bonds are saturated in saturated fats, and it has less saturated bonds in unsaturated. That's kind of PTSD from some chemistry days in college. Okay, so we want more fats that are unsaturated in our diet than saturated. So a diet very high in saturated fats has more negative cardiovascular outcomes. So where do trans fats come in? Does anybody know what a trans fat is? Want to take a step? So we made them. We manufactured trans fats. So we said, okay, we know saturated fats aren't healthy, but they have some other benefits to them, like they're solid at room temperature, and unsaturated fats are liquid at room temperature. So for cooking purposes, food science purposes, marketing purposes, we created trans fats. So if you think about, can't you believe it's not butter? Is that what it's called? Originally it was made so we could have an unsaturated product become solid, become a saturated fat, and that creates trans fats. So it was all the rage, super awesome scientific, creation, but then we realized it has detrimental effects on cardiovascular disease, those trans fats, and trans is a type of bond also. So they're hydrogenated to make solid, which means that hydrogen molecules is changing that bond. So in November 2013, the USDA took them off the generally regarded as safe. So that was a big deal. It said these aren't safe to consume regularly. They were found to raise the bad cholesterol, that LDL cholesterol, and not just increase LDL, but actually lower HDL, which not a lot of foods can do both. So we want HDL is good, we want it to be high, we want LDL to be low, and trans fats can actually inverse that correlation, which is not good. So saturated fats, jumping back up, mainly come from animal sources. So we think of the fat on a meat cut, baked goods, fried foods. They are solid at room temperature. So let's think about a fat that's become all the rage in the last 5 to 10 years, that's solid, that people claim to be the ultimate health. Does anybody?
Ghee.
What?
Ghee?
Nope. Coconut oil. So it's solid at room temperature. It's a saturated fat. So we have had years of people gulping up, literally putting coconut oil in their coffee to be more healthy, when really, right, that's going to play just into your overall total saturated fat intake. Anecdotally, does it have some health benefits? Maybe. Scientifically, no. Is it great for skin? Yeah. I don't recommend it really for any beneficial food nutrition outcome. So monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats are where you want to gain most of your fat into your diet. They are correlated with improving blood cholesterol when replacing saturated fats. So they're mostly found in, when you think Mediterranean diet, heart health, they're found in those foods. And that's that staple of the Mediterranean diet, is unsaturated fats. That's why it gets so much positive media coverage. So fish, avocados, olives, walnuts, other nuts, liquid vegetable oils, flaxseed, chia seeds. Those are some popular things right now. And the U.S. dietary guidelines now recommend eating at least 8 ounces of seafood each week. That's quite a bit. So 3 ounces is about the palm of your hand. It's about the deck of a cards. Everybody's hands is pretty different, but about the size of a deck of cards is 3 ounces. So that brings me to one thing I realized when I have a long drive, so I start to think about everything I didn't put in my presentation. So one thing I was thinking about on the way here that I didn't cover was fish oil supplements, a big topic in heart health. I don't hear about it quite as much now, but in the early 2000s, it was like everyone and their dog were taking fish oil supplements. And so I'm not a doctor, I can't prescribe medication, but there are some things I think you should know about fish oil supplements. So one, I always recommend getting nutrients from real food sources instead of supplements. One, because we know how our body absorbs it. 2, it's just a more natural process for our body to break down real food sources. Second, there's been some really scary research following manufacturers in other countries who make fish oil supplements coming to the United States, opening the bins of fish oil supplements, and it not at all being fish oil. Or having other things in the supplements. And I don't like scare tactics, but that is something that I bring up with supplements in general. They're not regulated by anybody. So you have to take caution, and you have to do what's best for you. Obviously, listen to your physicians if it's a trusted physician, but take that into mind if you're just searching for, what supplement do I need now, right? Really, the food sources are king. Okay, cholesterol. What is cholesterol? It gets, so much bad connotation. There's some really interesting research that hasn't made it to the limelight yet about cholesterol, but basically it's a waxy substance that we make naturally in our liver, but we also consume it in animal sources, in sources of food from animals. So eggs, meat, things like that. So it's necessary, right? We don't talk about cholesterol being a huge benefit to our body. We need it. It makes cells, it produces, regulates hormones and vitamins that we make in our own body. Those are super important things. So this is a big one. In the 2015-2020 dietary guidelines, the recommendation to limit cholesterol was removed. Did you know that? Yeah, nobody talks about it. There are still physicians who are like, don't ever eat eggs, they're the devil. It's frustrating. So yeah, there's no, obviously that's the United States dietary guidelines, but it's just, it kind of blows my mind sometimes that this really important information isn't what we're talking about. So yeah, the recommendation is to eat, obviously, a balanced diet, follow some of these other guidelines, but not to harp or hone in on that cholesterol intake. You don't have to restrict your egg intake. If you're frying them in butter, then yeah, okay, maybe we could take a look at that. And that's one thing, that they talk about. It's still recommended that foods high in cholesterol be limited because many of those are also high in saturated fat, right? So it's not necessarily the cholesterol, but that saturated fat that's in that food, which has that association to raise LDL. So this is also an interesting tidbit. Only about 20% of the cholesterol in our bloodstream is what's coming from food. So our body makes about 80% of the cholesterol that we need. So if you were to eliminate cholesterol in your diet, or high to medium cholesterol foods, we can't really ever 100% eliminate a nutrient like that. You're only going to see a serum cholesterol improvement of about 10 to 20%. And that's not to say, screw it, do whatever you want. Just keep in mind that that's not the end-all, be-all to heart health. Okay, so red meat. I'd like to pause here and say that my bias, one of my only biases in nutrition comes out here, and that is that my husband and I own a small beef farm. So when I told him that I was doing a presentation on heart health, he said, "What are you going to say about beef?" Which it's close and dear to my heart. So I did a deep dive and I found some really interesting research. So yeah, right, up until very recently, beef was like eggs, just the really voodoo taboo topic of heart health. So I'm going to read you, I don't want to misspeak, so I really actually want to read these studies, and these are all cited in the end. So in a study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, research, pause there. These are studies, published studies. So whenever you're looking for information, right, that's one key piece to take into consideration. That you're not getting information off of BuzzFeed or I don't know what other things are popular right now. Just general media, Instagram, TikTok, for the love of all that's good. Right? That's not where your nutrition information and health information should be coming from. All right. Researchers from Penn State University found that people who participated in a beef and an optimally lean diet, coined the BOLD study, maintained healthy blood cholesterol levels while consuming a dietary pattern rich in vegetables, fruits, whole grains, nuts, beans, with lean beef as the primary protein source. The BOLD diet contained 4 to 5.4, weight was from before cooking, of lean beef daily, while providing less than 7% of calories from saturated fat, which is consistent with current fat intake targets. The BOLD study is one of the latest additions to the body of evidence that supports including lean beef in a heart-healthy diet. Boom! That's crazy. No one has ever, have you ever seen this on the news ever? Right? No one wants to talk about that. So I just think that's pretty cool. We don't have to be afraid of beef. It can really be incorporated. And that they were eating that every day, right? We have a lot of beef in our freezer, and we don't even eat beef every day, right? So being fearful of having it once, twice a week, or you can come through. Oh, never mind. You can hopefully try to break down that fear and move forward. So research published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that following a Mediterranean-style healthy dietary pattern that incorporated fresh lean beef, the Mediterranean diet doesn't normally incorporate lean beef, can reduce heart disease risk factors, including total cholesterol and LDL cholesterol and blood pressure by incorporating 7 to 18 ounces of cooked, fresh, lean red meat per week. Individuals can improve their cardiometabolic disease risk factor profile, including high blood pressure, low HDL cholesterol, and diabetes risk. Another cool one. So the Beef Life study conducted in the University of Colorado and the Wellness Center also demonstrated that eating lean beef 4 or more times a week as part of a healthy, high-protein diet combined with physical activity can help people lose weight and fat mass while maintaining lean muscle and supporting heart health. This study shows that lean beef is just as effective as other protein choices to improve weight loss, potential body composition, and support heart health when included as part of a healthy, high-protein diet. Just very cool research to come out recently. Really good news for beef farmers. So I'll leave you with that. Anybody have any comments on that or thoughts?
How are they defining lean beef?
That's a great question. I'm not sure. But it would be like lean ground beef is 95%, 5% fat. So it depends on the cut, really. And it would just, they're probably measuring the percentage of fat in that meat. So when you, which I might have included in a future slide, when you pursue red meat, really just cutting off any visible fat is enough to make it a lean red meat piece, right? If you are eating a burger that's 80-20, that's not a lean burger. If you're making, if you're making, meatballs or meatloaf and incorporating sausage, right, that would then take away from that lean factor. But anytime you're eating red meat and you reduce the amount of visible fat, or make sure your ground beef is a lower, like 5%, you're eating lean red meat. I don't know what the specific criteria were for each study though. Yeah.
So if you're cooking like two burgers and they're 95.5,
Yeah.
and you cook one at medium rare and one at well done, I understand like basically all I know is like you get more juice.
Yeah.
But what's the difference in terms of?
The percentages before cooking.
Okay. But when cooking it longer, does it burn off any of the fat?
No.
Okay. So it's just it's the exact same.
Yeah. Or it would be minuscule, the difference, because it's still sitting in that fat, right? So you're getting, yeah.
Thoughts or feedback on grass-fed versus industry?
That's a great question. I love it. Yeah. So we mainly do grass-fed organic. Just want to point out my biases because not enough people do in the nutrition world. And but we also will grain finish for certain clients, right? So there isn't a lot of research done on the difference, but there is some research, which I don't have cited, saying that grass-fed beef doesn't change, which I don't want to say something I can't recite exactly, but doesn't change your cardiac profile. So it's similar to something of lean chicken, right? That grass-fed quality, because it's not consuming the excess of fat and corn. Or grain that you're finishing it with. So anytime something is grain-fed or grain-finished, you're adding fat into the diet or adding a lot of carbohydrates so that the animal then converts that to fat storage. And so that's why grain-fed or grain-finished beef is more tender, right? The fat makes the meat tender, right? So when people say like, oh, I had grass-fed beef and it was awful, it was super tough, one, there's ways, it depends on how you're cooking it, that matters, but yeah, it has a lot less fat content because it's just eating grass. Also, it often takes longer to mature to a weight where a farmer wants to process it. Any amount of age you're adding to an animal adds some degree of tenderness or toughness. I'm sorry. So does that help at all? I apologize for not having a firmer study offhand, but there's very limited research done on the difference on cardiovascular disease with the difference between grass-fed and grain-fed or grain-finished, which would also be two different categories. And let me see what time is. to reiterate, a lot of times the grass-fed benefits personally to me is more ethical for me. Like ethical reasons over nutrition reasons is why, we pursue grass-fed or pasture-raised anything. And so that's something to think about. It's not always about the nutrition content. And that's the same that goes for organic, right? Organic doesn't mean healthier. Organic doesn't mean the nutrition profile is different. There are organic Reese's peanut butter cups. That doesn't mean it's different. It just means it has different ingredients in it. So you personally need to make that decision ethically about your food, right? Is organic an important moral value to you? Sometimes sure, sometimes not. And what foods you want to be organic and why, or locally sourced or grain-fed. And that's a different topic, but carbohydrates. Another food group that just can't catch a break. A lot of times we don't think about carbohydrates in cardiac health. A lot of times it's correlated with weight, negative weight correlations, or diabetes and things like that. But there are studies that have showed diets high in carbohydrates, high in carbohydrates, are linked to very poor cardiac outcomes, including increased cholesterol and a lot of other negative outcomes. So to break carbohydrates down and take the negative connotation out, it's just an energy providing nutrient. Our brain prefers energy from carbohydrates over anything. Carbs provide glucose for cells, fiber, and many other vitamins and minerals. So, I just said that a diet an excessive carbohydrate intake. And I'm emphasizing that excessive because there's always someone that will take that and say, okay, I shouldn't be eating carbohydrates. No, we still need an adequate amount of carbohydrates in our diet. So a diet with moderate to low carbohydrate intake with the majority of carbohydrates being whole grains has shown to benefit triglyceride levels, lower LDL, and overall health outcomes. So when we talk about moderate to low, that doesn't mean no. That's my campaign slogan. So a diet moderate to low in carbohydrates. What happens when you reduce your carbohydrates? So that one was rhetorical. So when you think about a pie chart, which I almost included, so you think about a circle, and you're going to think part of that circle is carbs, part of that circle is fat, and part of that circle is protein. So when you have, in 50%, I always go 50% for carbs. If 50% of your circle is carbohydrates and you reduce that, what happens to your other two groups? They increase, right? Or else you'd have blank space on your circle, right? So if you reduce carbohydrates, you reduce protein, and you reduce fat almost naturally, right? You have to be full from something and get, nourishment from other sources. So one of the huge negatives that's come from diets like paleo, keto, things of that nature, where we praise low carbohydrate intake and celebrate high fat intake, is that your diet is now composed of, a really high intake of fat. A really high intake of fat does what? Has negative heart health outcomes. So there have been people who, in the name of health, wanting to change their heart health, have listened to this fad diet industry, and that has said, do keto, do paleo, eat no carbs, it'll be great, bumped up their protein, bumped up their fat intake dramatically, and then gotten labs done. And you know what happened? They had really high triglycerides. Their cholesterol was increased or not improved at all. And so that's when almost everything comes back to, you need to eat a balance of carbs, fat, and protein, right? Reducing or limiting this huge limit in carbohydrates does not benefit your overall wellness and health. Can it do immediate things? Sure, you'll lose an immediate amount of weight. But studies show that any type of weight cycling up and down, you almost always rebound weight. You almost always regain your rebound weight in excess, which we'll talk about a little bit. Salt. Pretty straightforward, right? It's essential for fluid balance. So where salt goes, water goes. Okay, so that's if you've ever eaten really salty foods and feeling bloated. That's yeah, you do. You have water retention because of the amount of salt taken in. So it's regulated by the kidneys. How does salt affect blood pressure? Does anybody from based on what I just said? So if you have a high amount of salt, high amount of sodium in your blood, water would then follow the sodium, right? So more water will be pulled into your bloodstream, so the volume of your blood will increase. When the volume of your blood increases, your blood pressure increases because there's a higher pressure going through your vessels, right? So things like your kidneys are going to be beaten up a little bit. That's why people with really high blood pressure oftentimes down the road run into kidney trouble, because years and years and years of high blood pressure beating on your kidneys, right, starts to wear down those filtration systems. Same with your heart, right? Your heart's working on overdrive to pump that high volume. Then if you add in really high cholesterol, really high triglycerides, and have thicker build up in your arteries, there's that high blood pressure pounding, a thinning of your blood vessels. That's where you run into those cardiovascular incidences, ischemic incidents, and some of those negative outcomes. So the recommendations for the U.S. dietary recommendations are to consume less than 2,300 milligrams. So that's 2.3 grams. And that's pretty high. A lot of times people think, oh, I need to restrict my sodium, I can't have anything, right? But really we see benefits when sticking around that 2,000. If you have a doctor you have a condition where you need to be lower than that, by all means disregard this information, right? You have to follow what your physician's telling you. Some people have hypernatremia, which is just naturally really high sodium in the blood. Some medications affect it. If you have underlying heart disease, your doctor might have already put you on a 1,500 milligram restriction, and so definitely follow that. Overall, the majority of salt that we get in is from processed foods. So foods that we're not preparing, foods that are on a shelf, because salt is a preservative, right? It keeps food fresh and tasty. 10%, only about 10% comes from adding. And that really varies based on person. Like some people have a really heavy hand for salt, right? And that's, familial, cultural, lots of different things. But in general, people don't actually add as much salt as we think. And then 15% naturally in food. So, really thinking about where your food's coming from, where you're getting that processed food can help naturally reduce your sodium intake. So there is a typo in this statistic at the end, so I'm going to read it to you with the correct numbers. And so the error is that at the end, the 500,000 and 1.2 million should be flip-flopped. So if people in the U.S. consume an average of 1,500 milligrams daily of sodium, it could result in a 25.6% decrease in high blood pressure, an estimated 26.2 billion in healthcare savings. Other estimates project that achieving this goal would reduce cardiovascular disease deaths from 1.2 million to 500,000 over the next 10 years. So definitely an important factor in our health. Where are we? Okay. Exercise, lots of benefits to exercise. I'm going to breeze through this because I want to get to the last slide. So many benefits, including blood pressure maintenance. There are a lot of people who haven't been diagnosed with high blood pressure who have started to exercise, run, who have reduced their blood pressure without going on blood pressure medication. Helps maintain weight, strengthen muscles, motivate it. It's a great motivation to stop smoking. Helps reduce the risk of diabetes, improves stress, and reduces inflammation, which are both separate factors from food, right? Like we oftentimes just think food, heart health. Stress is a huge component of heart health. So dieting and weight. So there's a lot of research that's come out lately that's shown dieting, weight loss, purposeful weight loss has actually presented with an interesting risk of heart disease. One of those reasons is because any type of dieting puts you at the risk for a rebound syndrome of weight. Coming back on with a more significant amount than what you lost. And so we're finding that people who have yo-yo dieted or yo-yo lost weight up and down their entire lives are at a greater risk for negative heart health outcomes than people who have stayed at an overweight or obese BMI their whole life. That is huge, right? And that is something the diet industry does not want you to know. So I'll read through some of these. So new research showing risk of weight cycling, yo-yo diet poses increased risk of heart disease, diabetes, inflammation, possibly a greater risk than someone who has stayed a BMI considered to be obese. So that's over 30 of a BMI. So I'm going to skip down to the last point first. But along with fat overshoot, which fat overshoot means you've lost 10 pounds, then you gain 15 back, right? And then you lose 5 and you gain 7 back. Weight cycling can cause overshoot of blood pressure. So your blood pressure can actually end up being higher than before you started dieting. Increased heart rate, blood glucose, lipids, insulin, while depressing levels of HDL, the good cholesterol in women. Weight cycling can also contribute to chronic inflammation, and weight cycling that results in weight gain above your baseline may pose a strong risk for developing type 2 diabetes compared to non-cycling. That's an excerpt from today's dietitian. And then the last thing I'll leave you with is dieting, especially repeat dieting, is a predictor for future weight gain, especially among younger dieters who start out lean. So we have this phenomenon of dieting despite not having a high body weight, right? And that's like a predictor for eating disorders, disordered eating, body dysmorphia. So that's saying that if you diet, but you start out at a somewhat normal weight, you have a great increase of gaining even more weight. So a 2012 study that followed more than 4,000 mostly normal weight teenage twins into young adulthood found that the more frequent weight cycling, the greater increase in BMI and risk of becoming overweight. This association was strongest among teenage males who started in the lowest BMI category. And that's really opens the door to a whole nother presentation about dieting and weight loss and weight cycling. But just some really important things to take into consideration with heart health, right? It's not all about weight loss. It's not all about the size of your body. It's really a multidimensional conversation and topic about overall wellness. So these are my citations, and I'll pass those on to Steph, and she can, if you're interested, definitely reach out to her. And there's some great studies, especially about, not to show my true colors, but especially the ones about the red meat, just because it's so different from what we've heard and what we've been told for years and years and years. So any questions? Yeah.
What does 30 grams of fiber look like?
Okay, so let me show you. So this has 3 grams of fiber, right? So typically a granola bar or some sort of health bar would have between 3 and 5. Something like a Fiber One bar might have more. And so a serving of vegetables has between 3 and 5. A serving of vegetables can be anywhere between, depending on raw and cooked, a half cup to a cup. Typically cooked is a half of a cup because it just loses water and loses some size. And so I'm trying to think of some other things. So if you think about having 5 to 8 servings of fruits and vegetables, which is a pretty typical recommendation. 5, if you were going to go on the low end, 5 servings times 3 grams of fiber, you'd be at 15. You'd probably be more than that because the 3 grams is pretty low for most fruits and vegetables. So you'd be close to 20. And then your whole grains come into play. So I'm not big into trendy foods as a dietitian, right? A lot of dietitians just like love trying new things, but I've made myself try chia seeds lately. That's been my latest thing. And so I know that because I've been looking at the nutrition. I include it in oatmeal sometimes. I can't really stand them any other way. But so 2 tablespoons of chia seeds which is a lot, has 4 grams of fiber. A bowl of oatmeal. The oatmeal that's not super processed in a little baggie from Quaker. That has less so processing grains reduces the amount of fiber, right? So when you're thinking about what grains, you want less processed grains, like the whole oats. It doesn't have to be steel cut oats, but even quick oats, minute oats that are just not as broken down. The ones in the bag cook in a minute because they're chopped up. They're really processed. They don't have as much fiber. And that goes with really any grain. White rice and brown rice, they're both the same species of rice. Just brown rice has the fiber still. That's why it's brown. White rice has it removed, and that's why it has less fiber. So anytime you can make that choice, you're increasing your overall fat intake. If you have a day, which we all, there are some days where I'm like, man, what vegetable did I eat today, you know? You're going to probably have a lower fiber intake for that day, but really it's on average. The majority of the days, are you getting that close to 25 grams, right? And it doesn't all have to be it doesn't all have to be vegetables. It doesn't have to be multiple salads all day long, but do you have them sprinkled? Do you have fruits and vegetables sprinkled throughout your day? Do you have those grains that are providing fiber? Things like that. Fiber from food is always superior. Professionally, my professional opinion, is always superior to just adding a scoop of fiber into a drink. It's more natural. Your body digests it, or your body uses it more naturally and doesn't depend on that really quick, spike of fiber. If you need it, absolutely. If your doctor says, hey, this would totally help you, great, that's awesome. Everybody has a different GI tract. Yeah.
So, for those in the room, maybe I'm the only one that cannot eat red meat.
Yeah.
What would be your suggestion in obtaining protein?
Any other protein that you enjoy, truly. Do you eat other animal meats?
Fish, like chicken.
Yeah, absolutely. There's really no superior protein. I think it's challenging to get high quality protein as a vegan. Vegetarians can have a little bit more opportunity, but animal proteins are whole proteins. It's hard to get a lot of whole protein sources when you're a vegan and a vegetarian. You end up using foods that have amino acids that your body then combines to create whole proteins. Is it doable? Yeah. Can you have a great healthy life as a vegan vegetarian? Yeah. I'm not saying you have to eat meat, but I am definitely saying you don't have to cut meat out of your diet to be healthy. Great source of protein. So yeah, anything else, any meats, any nuts, nut butter, seeds, soybean, beans are great, but tofu, tempeh, if you like, if you enjoyed that. I think that's, yeah, dairy,
Here's the dairy. So,
You can, no, that's fine, yeah. I would say make sure you're getting calcium from other sources.
the reason I ask is not just personally, but I deal with a lot of student athletes that are cutting certain things out, thinking that they're doing the right thing
Right.
from an athletic perspective.
Yeah,
Trying to be leaner, trying to be not gain as much weight, and then you get into the eating disorders.
Absolutely. It's a very short walk from
Yes.
pursuit of athletic performance and disordered eating disorder. Yeah. Was there one over here?
I just wanted, does fiber reduce your cholesterol a little bit, arteries, does it help, does it have any effect?
Yes, absolutely. So cholesterol, that's not the right or fiber, is always going to be in your digestive tract because it can't get absorbed anywhere. And fiber binds with cholesterol, and so it's actually pulled out of your system through stool. Right, so a regular good intake of fiber will help. That alone might not help, right? Actually, you might not see the numbers drop, but that is incredibly helpful for maintaining a cholesterol.
It's slow it down or turn it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think you already answered the fiber supplements on it.
No, if you need them, absolutely. But if you're saying like, hey, this might be an easier way, I say, okay, what other food sources can you add to your diet before you just start scooping Metamucil into your shoes? Because then you get the other benefits from the food too, right? You get, there's just phytochemicals, those natural plant things that, like antioxidants, vitamins and minerals that you're not going to get necessarily from that. And that type of fiber doesn't necessarily keep you full like fiber, like if you were eating a whole grain piece of toast with peanut butter on it, right? That's not going to be the same feeling as you scooping a scoop of fiber into a drink.
You recommend that cheese or dairy that's the healthiest?
That's a loaded question.
Those that love cheese.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, we're a big dairy family. So I would say that if you're eating a great variety of things in your diet, but you enjoy dairy, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But if you have a diet that's still really high in saturated fats and other sources, and then you're doing a ton of dairy on the other side and the other end, you're running the risk of having some negative outcomes from having too much saturated fat in your diet. What are some benefits of whole fat dairy? Super satisfying, super satiating. Whole fat, our body loves to use whole fats. What do you get when you have a low fat product? More sugar. So, that's this is a whole nother topic, but we thought the 80s was low fat, 90s low fat. Didn't turn out so well, right? Because when you take a ton of fat out of a product, you have to add stuff back in. And so you add sugar and carbohydrates back in, right? So my maybe personal opinion / professional is that if you want to incorporate whole fat dairy into your life, then there's absolutely a healthy way to do that. If you are drinking a half gallon, a gallon of whole milk a day, probably not the best idea, right? But sometimes I feel like it's helpful to know what a dietitian eats. I don't do this to say this is what you have to do, right? I drink whole milk. I eat whole milk, whole fat yogurt. I get whole fat sour cream. I get whole fat cottage cheese. Can't stand low fat cheese, right? Because I'm going to enjoy that amount that I'm eating significantly more than if I used a diet replacement. And that goes across all boards of nutrition. If you're eating a health food in substitute for something real, maybe that's not the best wording. How can I phrase that? So let's say you really want a cookie, right? But you don't think that's healthy. So you get those thins. What are they called? Like
Oreo thins.
Oreo thins, right? When you say, this is better, right? The package says it. And so I'm going to eat that. Okay, so what happens? You don't feel satisfied. You eat the whole package of Oreo thins, and then you feel guilty and mad at yourself, and then you probably go eat something else because you're still not satisfied because you wanted a real cookie. So then you end up with all the calories, all the carbohydrates, all the sugar, all the fat from what you did eat, instead of just eating the cookie and being happy, right? And that's an intuitive eating hack coming out. But that's the basis behind non-dieting, right? A non-dieting approach to health. When you diet, you restrict and you substitute, and it leads to cravings, fixation, just a huge amount of obsession over a food that you're avoiding or cutting out. So that's my opinion on dairy. So go circle back.
I'd rather have a little bit of whole milk.
And some people, my mother-in-law absolutely loves skim milk. That's fine if you absolutely love it. Yeah.
I don't know what is in Metamucil, but I'm just wondering if you have an opinion on, like, if you were to take a fiber supplement with, like, psyllium husk.
I don't have a strong opinion on that at all. Yeah, I think they're all pretty comparable. I think they're all pretty. Yeah, I'm not well versed on my fiber supplements. I am of the mindset that if you could increase your fiber intake, like, could you have, whole oats and flaxseed mixed in and blueberries in the morning? Fiber, instead of that supplement, right? And if not, and there's so many reasons why someone needs a fiber supplement, and I'm not discrediting that at all. But if you're choosing, I always would choose food, or doing something really gentle and not all the time. One thing that happens with your GI tract is it's very temperamental and it gets reliant on things. So it's very similar to people who depend on laxatives, not just fiber supplements. Your body will start to actually lose muscle memory of having a normal bowel function itself. And so you become dependent on that laxative. So fiber supplements are a lot more gentle. They are more natural than laxatives, but you run the risk of your body needing that amount of fiber, that concentration of fiber, instead of just depending on food sources. Yeah.
Is pork considered less healthy than other food?
Pork?
Yeah.
No. So it would go back to the same fat perspective that we talked about with beef. If you're eating bacon as your source of protein, that's a super high saturated fat protein. Can you have bacon every once in a while? Yeah, I made BLTs last night. I used the leftover bacon on my omelet this morning. Super normal, right? To have a variety of foods in your diet. But if you're having pork and it has a big grizzle around the side, cutting that off and not eating it is the way to make it a much more lean cut of beef. Sausage, yeah, high in fat, right? So having it in moderation. If you're concerned about that, right? If you have very low fat intake in other parts of your diet and day, having sausage isn't detrimental, right? And that's all you're relying on. Yeah. But I can tell you, my grandma's 93. She's never eaten chicken, doesn't like fish, eats ground beef and pork like nobody's business, and has no cardiovascular disease. So there's also this component of genetics, right? Heart health is hugely reliant on genetics, too. Yeah, anything else? Yeah?
Yeah, I guess just in terms of the salt for your heart health, like when you work out and sweat a lot, everyone says like you're losing salt, and so you need to replenish it. So yeah, like just in terms of like primary stuff, like what do you think about like electrolyte powder and the appropriate amount of, like how much salt are you really losing?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for an athlete, yeah, that's something to think about. If you're having a really hard workout where you're really sweating a lot, one, you don't plan to eat closely after, making sure you get some sort of electrolyte supplement is helpful, if not very important, depending on what you're doing, right? Should you only be drinking liquid IV all day? No. So I drink liquid. I like the product Liquid IV. I don't normally promote supplements, or anything, but something like that, similar to that, a serving is adequate after a workout.
Or just one?
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay.
Because what are you doing the rest of the day? You're eating,
Yeah.
right? And so there are so many electrolytes in your food, your body just doesn't get them as quickly. So as a recovery from a very strenuous workout, say you did yard work all day, played with the kids, or at the beach, right, and just were hot all day, sweating, not drinking, right, that's dehydrated. Sure, having some sort of electrolyte supplement, helpful. But if you are just going about your day, you don't necessarily need them because you're constantly replenishing with food, right? Just food doesn't necessarily replenish quickly after a strenuous workout where you're losing a lot of electrolytes. That's really the purpose of electrolyte drinks, is to quickly replace them in that immediate period.
You said we're certain.
Yes, again, I think that's just an average person, right? If you're sick, vomiting all over, right, diarrhea, maybe more than that, right? You might want to drink Gatorade throughout the day or have a couple servings, but that's again that rare period in your average life where that might be appropriate, right? Because you're so depleted at that point. But for an athlete, thank you. Yeah, even an elite athlete, you are going about your day consuming electrolytes in your food. You know, the sodium, potassium, magnesium is in our food. So to say like I need to consume it solely from an external source, in a drink, isn't factual. But it helps in that immediate recovery period.
You mentioned magnesium.
Pardon?
You
Yes.
mentioned magnesium. Sources of that?
Any fruits and vegetables, not any, most fruits and vegetables have magnesium. Potatoes, dairy products. I wouldn't know what to say about processed foods because most processed foods have sodium in them and potassium, but I'm not quite sure if magnesium falls into that category as well. Yeah.
Sorry to do that.
No, you're fine.
So like at the dining hall that I eat at almost every day, like they don't really have any seafood. The only seafood they'd have would be fried fish once every 2 weeks. They don't really have avocados. So just in terms of like we don't know olive oil, that sort of stuff. Like, we don't know if they're
Most of your food's going to be cooked in olive oil.
okay. But like, how would you recommend like?
Yeah, so some other ways to get those things. Tuna fish on the salad bars or sandwich bars. Sushi, because there's still a sushi station here. Not all.
There's like a
They used to.
There's like a protein.
Same, yeah.
It's not really sushi. Yeah.
That's okay, but still sources of fish. Anytime. I mean, yeah, it's a rotating special. It's not super common in I'm not saying this in a bad way, but in mass-produced kitchens, right? Because it doesn't go as well. So yeah, anytime you can get that rotating menu of seafood, sure. But your more regular ones would be tuna fish, any type of poke bowl or sushi station. Using olive oil based salad dressings on your salads. Right?
Yeah.
Or just olive oil and vinegar.
Olive oil and vinegar, yeah. Even Italian dressing is olive oil, right? And using it on your sandwiches, using like an olive oil based dressing on your sandwiches, or adding. I'm pretty sure most salad bars have some sort of seeds and nuts.
Yeah, they have chia seeds and sunflower seeds.
Yeah, great sources, right there. Anytime you can get nuts in other locations, baked goods, granola mixes, trail mixes. I should go in the dining hall more. I haven't been in a long time, so that would give me a better perspective. But yeah, those are some sources of those omega 3.
I know right now that student services is working with the dining hall, so now might be a good time for you to make some requests. Maybe through the internet.
Yeah, no, I'm not. Yeah, I'm not really pressed about it. I was just curious. Like,
No, it's a really good point, and I'm sure that's a representative question of a lot of the student population.
But in general, dining halls in general don't serve high fat protein meat products because they have standards that they have to uphold and they try to mimic those guidelines, right? So they need to provide proteins and they're not gonna just throw out, do they have pizza with pepperoni on it? Sure. Do they serve sausage? Yeah. Do they serve bacon? Yeah. But they're always gonna have chicken. They're always gonna have a red meat product that's a leaner red meat product. A lot of times they use turkey for ground meat for tacos. So that's something you could ask too. those different substitutes.